everyone, this is your host Prasha and welcome to her STEM Stories, episode number 94. This week's iTunes review of the week is by kg.kritika, who says, I truly enjoy her STEM Story podcast. In fact, this is the first and the only podcast I listen to regularly. The interviews help me connect with wonder women around the world. They fuel me with ideas and boost me with my aspirations. Thank you so much, kg.kritika, for this phenomenal review. And if you like our show, please leave us a review. And I am going to read them on every interview episode. So let's get started. Today's episode is with Circe Verba, who is one of my very favorite people on Instagram. She's one of the very first people who has supported the show through Patreon, and she's incredible and her story is amazing. So let's get started and learn more about Circe.
Welcome to Her STEM Story, a podcast about real women with extraordinary science, technology, engineering, and mathematics stories. In this show, we'll talk to some absolutely inspiring women and highlight some women-led organizations in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We'll learn more about their work, their struggles, and how they think we can close the gender gap in STEM professions. Keep listening to get inspired.
Today we're talking to Dr. Circe Verba, a research geologist and STEMinst at the National Energy Technology Laboratory. She started her career in the Pathways Federal Internship Program and earned her Ph.D. in geology and civil engineering at the University of Oregon. She firmly believes in inclusiveness, as she is also hard of hearing and has Ehler's Danlos syndrome, EDS. This is an inspiring story where Circe walks us through her pivots in her science and also all the great tips to make science more accessible on social media and in SciComm. So let's talk to Circe to learn more about her fantastic STEM story. Hi, Circe. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Prasha. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here with you.
I am so excited. This is so cool. And thank you so much for being our first patron on Patreon. Yeah.
Oh, really? I was the first one? I had no idea.
Thank you very much. I love it. And I think there are just a few people who always like everything. And I'm just like so grateful that, people support my work, but also all the guests that come on the show. I think it's not about me so much. It's about them. And I just hope that we can keep bringing these stories because it definitely brings me a lot of joy.
Well, I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to be able to support you, because elevating the voices of women is so important. And this is such a unique way to be able to do that.
Oh,
so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. You taught me so much about using the Instagram stories. I had no clue I could do all that. I couldn't.
You know that I just learned recently in the last couple of weeks just by YouTube, and I was like, I've got to share this because this is like so intuitive that you actually have a full color wheel.
Yeah. That was awesome. No, that was life-changing because all my stories would otherwise have a red highlight. No matter what I do, it was always red highlight because someone said to me that you have to make sure the contrast works. And for whatever reason, I like the red highlight. But then I learned something. So it's pretty cool. So again, thank you so much for all that you do for us. And you're such an engaging community member. You also do so much with women doing science. That account is blowing up. So tell us a little bit about that before we get into your story.
Well, really, I can't take too much credit for Women Doing Science. That's actually an account that was first started by another fellow geologist. And she just wanted to try to get voices out there as well. But, during the pictorial version that Instagram is for the platform. And the account just blew up. So I was honored to become a part of the team. And so my role with the team is I actually assist with revising and editing the bios that all of these scientists are submitting to the account.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's such a great account. And it's just so cool to see all these different professions. And I just hope we can do more of this. I hope we can bring everyone to the limelight, right?
Definitely, definitely. And I think we just received news too. So Alex, she'll be attending the American Geophysical Union in December. And because there were so many different individuals that submitted abstracts that were related to doing science communication on social media, that she got invited for women doing science as a panel discussion.
Yeah.
So that'll be super exciting in December.
Yeah, no, you guys are all gonna do great. I mean, that account is going to like lead the way for more such accounts, and kind of create that open space on Instagram, which is such a big platform, but also underutilized for science communication, underutilized for advocacy. And it's wonderful to see that platform kind of take that direction, at least in yours and my world, where we're seeing it more and more with accounts like Women Doing Science, Ph.D. Balance, all these people are talking about things that really matter, and then they're receiving the support in return, which is always warm and nice to see that, there is a
Definitely.
need for it. Not everyone wants to look at makeup videos, which is great to know.
But you know what? One of the things that I've been learning for my own personal science communication is I've been going to different YouTube videos, which have the women, that are doing the self-taught makeup demos, but also integrating in a whole bunch of videos from guys that are doing cinematic vlogging, because it's how do you tell a story with video and pictures, and that's what we really desperately need to be able to do as scientists.
Yes. I think again, it's I heard it at one of the conferences. It's great because it's like science and scientists have a very bad PR, and we need good PR. And you're right, like how are we going to get good PR is through learning how to use these platforms well, and blending some of the skills that we may not have learned in school, or we didn't go to school for, or we may not be the best at, but we got to give it a shot. We got to keep trying. And again, that opens up such a huge population to you, where you can impact the masses. That's the beauty of PR, marketing, branding, all these kind of tools, is that you go from a little community or a little sphere of influence to mass audience, and to grab everyone's attention. And it's something as little as color coding. I mean, I had no clue what branding meant till January. Like I had no clue what it meant. And I've seen it kind of grow, and understanding colors and what touches people, what affects them to listen or read or stop in their on their feeds is amazing to watch. And there's a whole science to it too, I'm sure.
Yeah, totally. And I can remember, so like I guess kind of like it's a really great transition kind of about what you were talking to, like a little bit about myself is I grew up in a rural redneck little town, and so I didn't have a lot of exposure to science. And so the ability to have access to technology that has scientists to connect with the younger generation, like I can only imagine how many more people we can touch now. Because if I'd had that, I can only imagine, just how much greater my life would be now. Yeah. So tell us how it was growing up in rural America, and, kind of what did you learn from your experience there? So I am a first-generation college student, and it was just a very tight-knit family members between my mother, my sister, and I. Yeah. So it was just the three of us against the world, growing up in a very conservative area where it was just a very different kind of thinking. And I grew up where my mom was on disability, and so there was a lot of things that I didn't get to do. There wasn't a lot of options except for one opportunity that really changed my life. And so when I was in 8th grade, I discovered, oh my gosh, I love earth science. I want to be an astrophysicist. That's what I'm going to do. And in the program they have it's called SMILE. So it's the Science, Mathematic, Investigative Learning Experiences. Wow. And so because of that, I was able to accept a summer internship 2 weeks after I turned 18 and to start doing, taking college classes at Oregon State University.
Oh,
So, yeah.
in 8th grade?
No.
Okay.
After I turned 18.
Okay. I was like, oh, wow. She went to college like really early.
I had things where the program is hosted by Oregon State University.
Okay.
And so kind of starting from 8th grade and then being able to make that jump to the university.
Yeah. And that's amazing that they start so young. Like, that's good not to wait till 11th grade or 12th grade, kind of start young so that people, so that kids they're still malleable, their brains are still like, you can shape them into something. If you go to 11th and 12th, it's like, we used to have colleges who would come over like in 11th and 12th, and you've already made up your mind, and it's like, why are you doing this to me? And teenagers are a pain anyway, so
oh, definitely.
So that's interesting. So those programs definitely can increase interest and also create a pipeline, like your example shows us that, we should also promote those kind of experiences, or even like what you guys are doing with Women Doing Science, because a lot of teenagers are now hanging out on Instagram, and, a lot of teenagers are on these platforms. And if there's any way we can capture their attention to start thinking about such careers, because, in financially backward areas in the US, this is still it's like nobody knows a scientist. So why would I become one? And you can't be what you can't see, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I have so much respect for first generation anyways. I mean, people who kind of break the glass ceiling and, kind of do things differently. It must be scary. It is scary. I'm a first generation immigrant, and it's very scary because when I was coming to the US and there was no one here, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go like 24 hours away on a plane and have no one that I know.
Yeah, I would say that's a much bigger jump kind of than what I did.
No. And I think
just went across the state.
Yeah, no, still, I think the journeys are special and unique in their own way. So tell us a little bit about, what do you do today as a research geologist? Before that, tell me, what is a research geologist?
So a research geologist is kind of a blanket term that I use to identify as, because I have such a unique path through science.
Mm-hmm.
So because I wanted to be an astrophysicist initially, once I got to college and I started off as a physics degree, I loved my astronomy courses, but I hated doing upper division physics and quantum mechanics. Like I really struggled with it. And so I was able to actually go into a new program under Earth Sciences where I got to create my own degree. And so I took a little of astronomy, a little atmospheric sciences, the geology, soil science, to kind of like have a holistic kind of view of how the Earth kind of exists in all these different fields.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to study the planets and the stars, and I was gearing towards that direction. I had an internship at SETI Institute with NASA Ames. And then for my master's, I went over and I studied at the U.S. Geological Survey in Flagstaff, Arizona, while I got my master's, and studied Martian dust devil tracks. And I got to play, I got to play with HiRISE, which is a high-resolution camera on one of the orbiters, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and also with Spirit, which is one of the rovers that is now, rest her soul, sleeping.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's amazing. How did you do that? Was that a provision at the university you were at, or, how did you kind of blend all these things together? Because I'm interested.
I was just kind of a trailblazer, I think, from the start. I was trying to figure out, how do I make this work with my interests? And I learned that, the skill sets that we get from learning how to do image analysis for microscopy and chemistry and physics, it's all integrated. And so that was like the early on portion of like my scientific endeavor, I want to say. But then I came up against a challenge to where I just received my master's degree, and NASA's budget pulled everything back from HiRISE. And they said, okay, we're going to be putting that money into another rover because we missed our launch window in 2009. So we're going to put new instruments on it. And that rover is what everybody knows as Curiosity. So I kind of, lost my job a little bit because of Curiosity. So I had to figure out, what am I going to do next?
Yeah.
And so I took a fellowship back in Oregon at the National Energy Technology Laboratory. They said, you have this background in geology, you have your mineralogy, your petrology. So that's essentially like, what do the minerals look like? And how can we determine what the diagenesis of this material is? So like, what was the mechanisms to how these rocks formed? And we'll teach you how to use an electron microscope. I said, cool. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And after being there for a year, they're like, we really think you should get your Ph.D. and we're going to pay for it.
That's awesome.
And after having like more than $75,000 in school debt, I said, okay.
Whatever you want me to do.
So I went from more of a geophysics planetary background to more of a geochemistry and integrated civil engineering into it because of the kind of projects that I was doing at a DOE laboratory. And so long story now kind of wrapping up that is why I consider myself a research geologist.
That's a great way. I think that's a great way to sum it up, but also wow, just the pivots. I love pivots. It's my favorite part about the show, about the stories, about people. I think pivots are empowering, but they also show people that, nobody has a straight line. You don't need to have a straight line or be open to all these twists and turns and, just follow. In your case, don't follow curiosity. Go away from curiosity. That's funny.
That's very true.
Yeah,
we still love her. It's okay.
I know. But I feel like, that's an amazing story in terms of just how many wonderful things you got to do. And you got to be like really brave to like try all these things and, not be intimidated. Did you have any imposter syndrome while going through these transitions?
Oh, totally. And you know what? And I tell a lot of college students when I go do like panel discussions at universities or for recruitment events is that the imposter syndrome never really goes away. You just get better about dealing with it and trying to do self-affirmations to know that you have a place there. You know your stuff.
And I think people don't realize like confidence is a skill and you have to nurture it and grow it and, keep at it. It's very easy to dismiss it like, oh, you're confident, so it's not a problem for you and I'm not confident. And it's like, no, like people, work on confidence. It's kind of getting these tools in, understanding how you're going to maneuver some of these things. And they're easily learnable, which I think kids and, young adults should definitely think about. You don't have to like come to this planet, but like already with a manual of how to go around. You have to like kind of earn those as you go through your journey. So I think it's just so great. But also tell us, what do you do in advanced microscopy now at the National Energy Technology Laboratory?
So now what I do is I am a PI. I'm running a project related to looking at materials that will contain rare earth elements. And REEs are critical for energy applications or any technology applications. So it's your cell phone, which has REEs. It's the magnets that go in wind turbines or improving the energy system. Anything that we can do better instead of like a computer that took up a whole room that we now have compressed down. REE metals are the way that we're able to do that.
So it's a silicone?
No, so they're most of the RE ores. So that's going to be like the 17 different elements. Most of them are on the bottom of the periodic table. So you think about just cerium and lanthanum. Lanthanum is up above, but you also have like neodymium, for example, is a really common magnet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My periodic table is all gone. So
it's all the stuff on the bottom that you used to ignore when you were in school.
You would never listen. Yeah, they would be like, don't think about it. Don't forget it exists. Which had really heavy atomic weight, right?
Yes.
I remember something.
Yeah.
It's always hard because, chemistry or chemical, like I have a chemical engineering degree. That does not make me good at chemistry, like from, anywhere, shape or form. I don't remember it anymore. We don't use it. It's too hard to come back. And, that's why I feel like that's one angle of science communication that is my favorite, which is refresh my 8th grade chemistry or refresh my 8th grade math, And I think it's so important because of course, you have nostalgia attached to it because when you remember it, it's like, oh, I just studied in school. But also you kind of have a better understanding of all the, complex things that you're trying to accomplish, maybe in your career or, maybe in your education. It's very good to go back to the basics, right? And I absolutely love that angle of science communication. I always get excited. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your science communication work. How did you get from doing all these wonderful things that you were doing into this science communication track, which I think, didn't you say that you also do that at work? Like now your work supports your science
I do. So I have multiple hats at work. And so one is as a PI. I also run a full laboratory, which utilizes probably what we have as portfolios, so different areas of interest from metal alloys and such, to the diversity and inclusion team. And then I'm the primary STEM outreach personnel. Mm-hmm. And so I was at a crossroad long ago when I wanted to figure out if I was going to become a scientist or a teacher. And I did science, my science credits, and doing science teaching, decided that middle schoolers, which is when earth science was taught, wasn't quite the age group that I could really do. I thought if I could reach just one child that I would be fulfilled with that.
Yeah.
But it was very difficult because on the other hand, then you had parents getting upset with you for their kids, frustrations or for their difficulty to excel in the classroom. And that was really hard for me. Mm. And so what I love about bringing STEM education and doing the outreach is that I still get to kind of do that teaching. I still get to see the light bulb moment, when they finally understand a basic concept. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of fun to, get into the field and get very hands-on and do any kind of experiments from soda volcanoes blowing up while you're testing, what's the difference between a hot and a warm soda, or I'm sorry, a hot or a cold soda, regular versus diet, and so you get them thinking about the science with something that they probably have seen every single day. Yeah. And I love it.
Yeah. So you do part outreach, going to schools and, kind of working with kids, teaching them about science, right? And then you also do some part of diversity and inclusion work, as you said, through your work, right? What does that look like? Is it more so within your company, within the institute, or is it something that you would do outside as well?
I would say that the majority for the work that I do with the diversity and inclusion team is making the work site better for all employees and really understanding the kind of statistics that we have. Yeah. And being open to creating new avenues for people. I've been pushing for WebEx meetings to have the captioning or subtitling, and trying to encourage that Office 365 allows for automatic subtitling. And that's just because of my own personal partial deafness. Mm-hmm. But I want to also say is I've been working with this really fantastic multimedia person, Jess, and she knows how to help tell those stories. So she's been with us for about a year now, and we've been able to include both STEM education kind of products with diversity. So we want to highlight, not only what kind of research we do, but the individuals that actually do it.
That's amazing. I absolutely love your work on Instagram anyways, but I feel like it's such an important thing that I am glad that institutes and companies and organizations are thinking about and are giving a platform to think about how to make life easier as well as accessible at workplace. We shouldn't have to worry about, stuff like, again, not being treated equally or not being yourself. How can you do science if you can't be yourself? That's just beyond me. I can't understand that. So, it's really important that we think about it and promote it. And you're doing such a phenomenal job at it. And I learned something, which means I'm going to have closed captioning going forward. And we'll be able to accommodate that. Even for our show, you could go to YouTube and there is closed captioning on YouTube. That's the reason we post on YouTube, because then you have closed captioning. And then transcription is something that we have struggled with, and I'm trying so hard to raise money for it. But it's so hard to raise money. It's like the worst thing to do.
So there is actually a couple of programs where there's nationally funded dollars that you can actually get if you're eligible to help promote the ability to have transcriptions. And so after the show, if you'd like, I would love to be able to send you information on it. But there's federal dollars that does. So if there's anyone out there that needs it for important conferences and meetings, phone calls, someone will literally be transcribing for you.
Wow.
And so as long as you're eligible for the program, it's free.
Awesome. No, that'll be great. It'll be wonderful. Accessibility is a very important topic. And, tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit how people can become more accessible in their social media. If there are any tips that they can employ like that. We know that, some people use closed captioning, but I'll let you take over and tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. Well, and I know you had Stephanie on recently, and she did a really fantastic job, I feel like, about, promoting how you can improve your social media skills. And I really would just echo kind of, if you're going to do stories, I mean, honestly, 80% of us, even if you're not deaf or hard of hearing, you usually have your phone off and you're going to be flipping through your stories. Yeah. And if you just see someone talking and the lips are moving and there's nothing below, you're going to ignore it. You're not going to actually get anything beneficial from it. So being able to use subtitle programs like for iPhone, there's Apple Clips, which is free, Clip-O-Matic, which is like paid. And then I think for Android, it's like AutoCap. I think is the only one for Android that I think that is
that's what I heard too. Yeah. I always see the Android guys not doing it, and I'm like, why are you not doing it? And they're like, oh, because there's not a great app for it, and and I think it's only AutoCap that's kind of available for it.
So one thing that I've seen that a couple of people have done that I think is just as effective because they've been frustrated with AutoCap is because the stories are only 15 seconds each, is you could just write, whatever it is that you said in that clip. And put it in there. Yeah,
that's what I had to do today. My Clip-O-Matic was acting up. So sometimes it like kind of glitches on you because if you try to do too many and you try to save, or sometimes it just doesn't work. And so today I was like, you know what, I'm just going to add what I'm trying to say so people know what I'm trying to say. But, I always feel bad for not having those, which is important, especially stories are catching up. I remember when people said nobody's going to use Instagram stories. And it's the next frontier in marketing, in engaging people, in communication. And it's a wonderful platform. So tell us, what's that one thing people can take away from your story?
One thing that someone could take away from my story? I would say that the skill sets that you learn throughout life is applicable in so many fashions, and to explore more than you can imagine. Because you could start in one place and end up somewhere else. So that's something that I feel like a lot of graduate students get really stuck. They say, okay, I'm going to school, then I'm going to do a postdoc, and I'm going to be in academia for the rest of my life. And there's so many great opportunities in science. That's in industry, government, which is where I work, and doing now, as we're seeing, doing science communication.
Yeah.
So if you learn something about chemistry and you've been like doing more biology lately, hey, there's a way to kind of combine those.
Yeah. They're all interrelated at the end, and the possibilities are endless,
Yes. The possibilities are so endless.
Yeah. And that's the exciting part. I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by that, and I think they should like use it to drive them and explore them, because that's the excitement. We only get one life, so we should try to explore more things instead of just being a geologist or astrophysicist. We could or civil engineer. Let's just be all of it.
Yep.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about advanced microscopy.
So advanced microscopy is way beyond what you think about with a simple microscope that you might have learned to use in like college, where you turn on the light and the light transmits down. So advanced microscopy is really to understand, I'm going to throw a big word, petrophysical properties. And so what that is if we have a specimen, a rock sample, we want to understand all of the properties surrounding it. So what are the mineral phases? Can we determine what kind of porosity is in there? And if we have something of interest, particular related to the kind of work that I do for energy, is how much organics do we have in there, and how much rare earth elements are in there, so that we can actually estimate it. So our workflow, to make it kind of advanced, is we go from 2D, so we start really simple, and we do 2D images that we stitch together. So we have hundreds of images stitched together, kind of like a large map. And then we have a specialized software to where we do segmentation. So that's how we can essentially think about colorizing everything on RGB bands. So that's from 0 to 256. We're going to say if that has a color of like 200, we're going to make that green. And that helps us to be like, okay, is this rock sample a really good sample to be able to potentially use as a viable source? So if we have a whole bunch of coal waste or middlings and tailings that are sitting out outside in a refuse pile, can we actually reuse that material? Is that a good thing to be able to use to essentially recycle? And that microscopy process allows us to do that. And then the most important and most fun thing that I get to play with is a focused ion beam. So this is a beam where we basically shoot an ion. There's xenon and gallium beam, and it comes out at an angle, and it just kind of takes apart the material from it, and then we image it. And so what that is that it's individual slices. So we go through the same segmentation process that I talked about for 2D. Now we apply it, and we make this into a micro scale 3D tomograph. And so now we can say, oh, we have volumetric estimates of those critical metals, for example.
Wow. That sounds so cool. Very, very few people realize how powerful microscopy is, at least in, day-to-day life. I'm sure in science communities, of course, you can't have anything without microscopy. But very few people realize how powerful these microscopes are, and, how wonderful that whole world is. And thank you for explaining how you turned from black and white to colored, because I had no clue. Like, that is so cool. Like, I had no clue how that worked.
Definitely. Yeah, no, there's a lot of really great processes out there. And a lot of those techniques I actually picked up from processing images that we got from Mars.
Oh.
So across the board for all these geologic applications, you're going to be processing kind of the same. And you can do this for CT images, which CTs is, both used medically to like maybe look at like your ear canal, to also imaging like geological core. And it's same thing with MRIs too. So if you want to do really large segments, it's like an MRI is used to image your entire body. So in geology, we're going to be imaging maybe like 10 feet of core.
That's so cool. That I have heard about it, but of course, sometimes like you said, light bulb moment. Oh, wait, yes, they do use that. Oh, that makes total sense, and that's so interesting because even STEM, the reason it's called STEM is because of the overlap or how these all fields should work together and not be studied separately. And that's why it's not called science, technology, engineering, and math. The acronym itself was built to showcase that we're all in an interdependent ecosystem and one can't survive without other. And, this is just 4 pieces of like this gigantic puzzle or, where there's so many of us. Like, what will we do without accountants? What will we do without people in...
You get really, really good at using spreadsheets, especially when you become a PI.
Yeah. And what would you do without people like yourself who are working in energy field? And, we take everything so for granted. And it's important to kind of bring focus back to how interdependent these fields are. And it's so cool that do you get to play with CTs and MRIs or no?
We do on occasion. We have several systems at our sister sites in the East Coast. And so I would say about 5 years ago, I did a lot of work looking at shale for unconventional resources. So that's essentially extracting out natural gas from the ground using both vertical and horizontal drilling. But what we were trying to do is take it one step further, is to mitigate climate change by actually sequestering CO2 underground in those wells. So we would do experiments at high pressure and temperature in the CT scanner and try to monitor any kinds of dissolution or precipitation that we may need to consider if we were to have a field application.
That's so interesting. A lot of people also don't realize like the whole fracking or how you get natural gas or how do you drill these wells is amazing. It's right, it's bullets and you have to like blast it internally.
There's a lot that goes into it, and so hydraulic fracturing is actually really complex, and we use it in a lot of applications. So for example, geothermal uses hydraulic fracturing, and so you'll see a lot of people that are against hydraulic fracturing, but they're for geothermal energy because it's seen as green. But it's the same concept. So we have to drill a well in there, and there's usually a steel casing with well-bore cement that gets pumped down as a slurry to try to prevent any kind of contamination. The part to where you end up getting the natural gas out is going to be anywhere from like thousands to like even 20,000 feet underground. So that's well below the water level for any risk of contamination. And so the act of hydraulic fracturing does have some legitimate concerns, for induced seismicity. But what we need to do is to have better policies for regulating what happens with the flowback fluid. So once that's come back up the pipeline, and we're able to kind of remove the natural gas out of it, what do you do with the waste? Well, it gets transported on trucks, there's storage facilities, and every state regulates differently. And that's where we need to get better, because that's when we start to have issues.
Especially if is so much economics involved with natural gas and, fuel and energy in general. It's such a huge industry that if one state like Texas decides to say, oh, I just want to make money off of this, right? And then you start hurting the environment and not having really good systems and policies in place to control it.
And part of what like my job is especially coming from a planetary background of wanting to explore to now, okay, how do we make this more efficient and effective and safe? When we reuse material that we've already dug out of the ground for other means, be it, having it as an additive in cement or reusing it for rare earth elements. How do we prevent blowouts from the Gulf of Mexico? And that's what a lot of the researchers do. And a really big focus that we have is on carbon storage. So how do we help solve the issue with fossil energy as we're making the migration over to what is considered to be renewable? Because what's renewable still uses fossil energy in many approaches.
And people don't realize that, right? I mean, it's such a complex, anything that comes to form, right, has a complex supply chain or complex chain of events that have to take place for this thing to kind of work. And, so it's very important to get educated. So your work is very important. And thank you so much. Yeah, no, it makes so much sense. And I'm very happy that there are government organizations that focus on this kind of work, because that's something also we need to highlight here, is that, it's, again, we're going through a political climate, which is not probably very stable, but it's not like people are not doing anything. It's not like the government is just closing everything down and it's just going to be like, we're going to work in coal mines tomorrow. There's work that gets done day in, day out at places like yours, that kind of focuses on this kind of work.
You really hit it on the nail there, right? I mean, it's important to have like steady agencies to be able to continue to study this, because energy is in everything. It's in our ice cream. It's in our technology. It's in how we are able to like look at the stars beyond our solar system. And it's so critical to just continue to be able to evolve from where we are now. Yeah.
And it can't be created or destroyed,
Right.
It just goes from one form to another. So it's important to understand the life cycle of it, or if you will, like how it kind of changes form, especially in natural, when it occurs naturally. So we're going to make sure that we utilize all of it and not waste any of it.
Well, and you have to be efficient with it too, because there's a lot of other factors that go into it. So like Oregon has a lot of hydroelectric power, but you have to think about the cement that's there. You have to think about the corrosion of the alloys, because if you don't, you're going to be flooding a bunch of cities and you won't be able to generate the electricity. Your wind turbines, we have them all up and down the Columbia River Gorge. So those are massive beasts. So there's manufacturing that goes into it that you have to worry about.
Yeah.
You need the rare earth elements for the neodymium magnets to power it. And then the biggest issue is the power grid. So we have to be able to ramp up and sustain during peak hours for energy.
Yeah, it's an extremely complex ecosystem. I mean, I make wire and cable. We make cable for wind farm. We make wind farm cable in Texas. I used to work in that plant. And these are like this ginormous cables that go, we will make it for, we make medium volt that connects the wind turbines to, the windmills to the small substation, the first stop that all the energy is going to go. We also make the cable that hangs from the wind. So this is the cable that's hanging inside those big tubes that you see. We also make the control cables that connect the inner workings of the turbine itself. And then, we make cables that go from little substation to big substation to transmission to everything. We make all those cables that come.
It's very complex.
It is extremely complex. People think, what do cables don't, whatever. And I'm like, I always tell this in classrooms, and I say, count the number of cables that are around you, and kids go wild. They're like, oh my God, I have so many. But we should all appreciate the complexity that it takes so many people. I mean, so many people, like even if you just started thinking about saying thank you, like for every industry, you're going to run out of like time, like, because there's so many of us that make modern life possible, right? Like we found our way to stay busy. Let me tell you that.
It sounds like, and that's so fascinating to hear, like your story behind, like, you know, actually being able to like generate wind power. That's really cool.
What's your favorite book?
You know, when I listen to your podcast, I always hear this question, and I've been thinking about it all week, and I'm like, what is my favorite book? And you know what? I have books that I have dragged with me from high school to when I went to college, across state lines to, you know, Arizona and then back. And so I have a full bookcase of books that I haven't read probably in a decade, but I love books.
Yeah.
So I would say it's so hard for me to choose like just one favorite book.
You could choose two, but I will not put you on the spot. You love books. We're going to keep books. Yeah, all of them are great. One of them is not better than the other. I think they all have so much to offer, whether fiction, nonfiction, you know, whichever book you can get your hands on. I think every one of them has something to offer. So that's beautiful. You finally broke my record, actually 110 plus. And you're the first one to tell me that I love books and I am not picking one, which is wonderful. I love it.
I've been agonizing like all day about that question.
But this is wonderful. I am so happy that you were honest. So again, thank you so much for all that you do for us, for our community, all that you do in science communication.
So great. Thank you so much for having me.
And that was Cersei with her incredible STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Cersei and her amazing work. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite podcasting platforms. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.